Thank you, and welcome again. Really good to see everyone here and online. And thank you so much for turning out to practice and support each other's practice in doing that. So, anyone Ralph's shoppers at all in this room? Yeah, maybe a little bit, and part of the weekly shopping. So if you shop at Ralph's, you've no doubt run across their in-house brand that they call Simple Truth, which is such a great name. You know, it inspires confidence. Simple Truth, what could be better than that? Simple Truth garbanzos and lentils and Simple Truth eggs. And then it gets to Simple Truth salted caramels and Simple Truth double stuffed cookie sandwiches. And then it feels like they're pushing it a little far. But that's what I want to talk about today, is simple truth, simple Dharma. Because Dharma doesn't have to be complicated. And simple doesn't have to mean dull or uninteresting or less in some way. Except maybe a little less tangled up, entangled. So what does simple mean as we respond to the incredibly complex layers of life and politics and just being human in the world in this moment in history? Because it's interesting times. And so how do we live a life that feels authentic, awake, compassionate, useful, and still simple and untangled? Is that even accessible for us today in August 2025? So the friend and biographer of the Dalai Lama, Pico Iyer, a great travel writer and novelist, wrote, "In an age of speed, I began to think nothing could be more invigorating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing can feel more luxurious than paying attention. And in an age of constant movement, nothing is more urgent than sitting still." So he wrote those words a few decades ago, and I've always loved that passage because it feels like Dharma to me. Nothing more invigorating than going slow. Nothing more luxurious than paying attention. Nothing more urgent than sitting still. So we each have our own doorway into the spiritual life, or maybe several. In Buddhism, it's said that there are 84,000 Dharma gates, ways into the practice, thresholds from outer to inner, ignorance to wisdom, confusion to knowing. And for me, the gateway of stillness is the most welcoming. One of my mentors asked me a few years ago, what do you like to teach about? You know, kind of what gets your juices going when you're giving a Dharma talk? And I had to realize it's stillness. It's talking about this place of quiet that we can all access. And it's what kept me coming back to the practice. Not that every time I meditate, I experience stillness. In fact, many times quite the opposite. But that experience of stillness is deeply nourishing, comforting somehow, revealing, and it seems like the place where clarity and awareness meet each other. So Ajahn Chah, the Thai forest master monk, says this of our practice: try to be mindful and let things take their natural course. Then your mind will become still in any surroundings, like a clear forest pool. All kinds of wonderful rare animals will come to drink at the pool, and you will clearly see the nature of all things. You will see many strange and wonderful things come and go, but you will be still. This is the happiness of the Buddha. So if you grew up like I did in a place where it snowed in the winter, maybe you felt that amazing hush after a big snowfall, the sound absorbed by the snow, cars and people moving slowly, if at all, the sky likely overcast and muted. Or maybe you felt that sort of hush in a church, a synagogue, or a temple, or a sacred place. Every time I meet in this room, in sangha, I feel more of that stillness in this space because we're contributing to that. Or maybe you felt it in the quiet of a sunset or taking rest at the side of a hiking trail. And maybe you felt it in your practice. I hope so. Maybe you felt it a few minutes ago, or maybe you felt it a few minutes ago for a few seconds, when we were doing this amazing thing of sitting together in a circle and online, just being still together. The most wondrous and touching thing to me about sangha is honestly the fact that we choose to be still together, to stop, to give the heart and mind and body the opportunity and the space to rest. And that we know that what we're doing is important, this radical non-doing, that we value this simple, simple practice together, and that we support it and create opportunities to experience it and to share it. And it feels like a vital support to how we live our lives right now, how we respond to this world as spiritual practice, how we care for ourselves, how we care for each other, how we care for all beings. And I want to bring in some words of Joanna Macy, who died about a month ago at the age of 96. And Joanna was an environmental activist, an author, scholar, and teacher of Buddhism, a great, great teacher. And she's really famous for her practices to reconnect our lives and our world. One of her most famous books is Coming Back to Life, which has beautiful, beautiful practices in it. And toward the very end of her life, she said, "We cannot be sure or even have the trust that complex life forms will endure beyond the next few decades. We're seeing a huge shattering of life itself. And yet, trust in life is still with me. And so I trust being with life, even though life, the web of life, might crumble, but then I'm still with it. I'll be with it anyway, even in the crumbling." And she also said, everything we do impinges on all beings. Everything we do is a political act, including meditation. Just trying to stay aware is a task of tremendous importance. We are trying to be present to ourselves and each other in a way that can serve our planet. And she says, saving life on this planet includes developing a strong, caring connection with future generations. For in the Dharma of co-arising, we are here to sustain one another over great distances of space and time. The Dharma wheel, as it turns now, also tells us this, that we don't have to invent or construct our connections. They already exist. We already and indissolubly belong to each other, for this is the nature of life. Even in our haste and hurry and occasional discouragement, we belong to each other. We can rest in that knowing and stop and breathe and let that breath connect us with the still center of the turning wheel. Let that breath connect us with the still center of the turning wheel. And one of the things that I learned from studying and practicing and offering Dharma talks is that I don't have to reinvent the Dharma. I don't have to try and spice it up or try and create something new. And there's a very human tendency, or maybe it's just my tendency, to, kind of want to fancy things up, to add, to embellish, to make a lot of what is really simple, to take what's simple and make it complex. And this path is really inviting us to allow natural stillness to be known, to relate to experience with love and to act from that place. To be simple, voluntarily simple, unadorned. And during meetings like this, we often talk about the lists, the 7 factors of awakening, the 5 powers, the 12 links of dependent origination, the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths. There's a whole section where there's like the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s, the 6s. It goes all the way up to the 12s. Yet the practice itself is so simple in the sense of being still and letting life reveal itself. Being still and seeing the many strange and wonderful things that come and go. Because that's the Dharma, knowing through a stilling of chatter and concepts what is really real, and letting that knowing be our guide. And when you think of the moments in your life when you really, really observed, particularly maybe natural phenomenon, when you really observed something, how much chatter and commentary and narrative was there? So there's a beautiful teaching of the Buddha to a follower named Bahiya, and Bahiya was a wandering ascetic. And he'd practiced for a long, long, long time, but his practice was stuck. And some celestial beings came to him and told him, you think you're on the right track, but you're missing something. You need to go and see the Buddha. The Buddha will help you. And so he asked the Buddha 3 times to teach him. And finally the Buddha said this to Bahiya: in the seen, let there just be the seen. In the heard, let there just be the heard. In seeing, there is merely seeing. In hearing, there is merely hearing. In sensing, there is merely sensing. In cognizing, there is merely cognizing. In this way, you should train yourself. Bahiya, when there is only seeing in seeing, hearing in hearing, sensing in sensing, cognizing in cognizing, then you will not be with that. When you are not with that, you will not be in that. When you are not in that, you will neither be here, nor beyond, nor in between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. Let yourself be still and simple and unattached. There's a sort of figure ground shift that happens on this path. And with practice, we can access it more and more, because the mind that can simply know is always here, running alongside the mind that is distracted and distractible and filled with stories. Ruth Denison put it this way: we have 2 minds always running, the conditioned and the one that is intuitive and aware. And it's that intuitive and aware mind that the Buddha was pointing out to Bahiya, the mind that simply knows without becoming entangled, without identifying with or against, without identifying as anything at all. The mind that is not thinking about the experience, that isn't adding layers of comment, analysis, and narrative. The mind that simply experiences and knows the experience. Sometimes called bare awareness or bare attention. Words help us communicate what we know to others, but is the experience of, for example, watching a rabbit on the lawn in back of your place, or the waves crashing on the beach, or a bud opening on the end of a twig, is the experience of something, the observation of what it is really, more complete with a mind of commentary? Or is it more complete with a mind that is simply observing? This moment, without the overlays of comment, comparison, conditioning, is unlimited. So this week I remembered something that Gil Fronsdal, a wonderful teacher in Redwood City, said about this idea of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not about you being free, but granting everything its freedom. Enlightenment is not about you being free, but granting everything its freedom. Simple, right? This is the letting go, the renunciation, the disentangling that the Buddha taught. Letting all things belong to themselves, not to me. And there's something that's so graceful in that formulation of granting everything its freedom, because it's not a pulling away. It's not a pushing away. It's not tense. It's a release, a letting go, letting the shoulders drop, the belly soften, the hands open. The whole system relaxing into the freedom of letting go. And wow, human beings have never lived in a time of more content and commentary and complexity and controversy. We live with more words and more information, more inner and outer dialogue than ever in history. And with very, very few exceptions, like here today, we have not made very much room for silence or stillness or wordlessness, for the simple. And so we could take that quote from Pico Iyer and adapt it a little for this moment in history. In an age of unrelenting information, disinformation, and commentary coming at me and demanding my attention 24/7, I began to think nothing could be more invigorating than going slow. In a dominant culture that seeks to not only distract me, but to confuse and manipulate me, nothing can feel more urgent than paying attention. In an age and culture of conflict and reactivity and dissatisfaction, nothing is more urgent than cultivating stillness so that I can see clearly. And what does it mean to go slow, to pay attention, to see clearly in a field of granting things their freedom? What does it mean to let go in a world that seems to be falling to pieces, where climate change and environmental destruction is accelerating, where there's genocide and starvation, our families and neighbors are being abducted and deported, elected officials and judges are targeted and fearful to speak up and follow their conscience, their integrity, where integrity is a footnote and people can no longer agree on justice, on honesty, on fairness. What good does being still and going slow and paying attention and seeing clearly do in a world like this? One thing it does is it ensures that some people are committed to staying awake, that some people still care and are not paralyzed with apathy or anesthetized by the narratives of delusion and division. That we make a choice that we're not going to intentionally add to the hate in the world. We're not going to intentionally add to the confusion in the world. Not going to swat this fly on my face. That's my test. Not going to add to the noise in the world that obscures what connects us. Because it isn't the noise that connects us, the chatter, the opinions, social media. It's the stillness within us that connects us. The simple, unadorned heart and mind, the simple heart of awareness that we all share. When the heart and mind are simple and unadorned, the appropriate response to this complex experience becomes a little clearer. So one of the most famous teachings of the Buddha is in the Dhammapada. Hatred is never overcome by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred overcome. This is a law eternal. That's been repeated by many wise people through history. And this is a very powerful and unadorned teaching, and it helps answer the question of how to respond. For some reason, humans keep trying to fight hatred with more hatred, violence with more violence. You know, if someone is sick with poison, we don't think, oh, let's give them some more poison. That should help. And, you know, when we see a fire raging, we don't go and light another fire on the side to lessen the impact. But for some reason, there's still that very human urge to fight hate with hate, to hate the haters, to yell louder, to want to punish and shame and get rid of them. Why is it that we think that that might work? And I'm not talking about anger. You know, when we see injustice or harm or ignorance, when we see people's freedom and dignity being taken away, of course, anger will arise. But hatred is sort of when that anger has nowhere to go. The civil rights freedom riders in the 1960s didn't sit around simply loving the white supremacists and vigilantes who were bent on supporting the systems of oppression through any means, violent means. Of course, they had to be angry on some level, but the deep wisdom of the movement and its leaders transmuted anger into wise action rather than letting it congeal into hate. They acted out of love for their own communities, and they acted out of love for the possibility of a future that was different. Did they love their oppressors? There is something in hate that feels to me hopeless. Hate is when we've given up all hope, when we forget the power of love. So the great civil rights activist and Congressman John Lewis said this: hate is too heavy a burden to bear. Hate is too heavy a burden to bear. He said, before we went on any protest, whether it was sit-ins or the freedom rides or any march, we prepared ourselves and we were disciplined. We were committed to the way of peace, the way of nonviolence, the way of love, the way of life as the way of living. And I was talking to a Dharma friend a few weeks ago, and I felt this sort of view become really clear and simple in our conversation. The simple choice that we have, adding to the hate and suffering in the world or not, our way of life, our approach to life, that all we're asked to do in response to this moment, whatever the moment contains, is to respond in line with our deepest integrity. If we practice as Buddhists, that means to respond in line with the Noble Eightfold Path, and particularly right intention, which is non-hate, non-harming, letting go, which in turn supports how we are in the world, our integrity expressed in right speech, right action, right livelihood. If we add hate to hate, we just get more hate. And the line of experience continues deeper and deeper into suffering and pain. It's only through right intention and right action is there the possibility of peace and freedom. It's that simple. The simpler I can keep my practice, the better it goes for me. If I get caught up in ideas and theories, my meditation often goes awry. I get confused and tangled. But if it's as simple as slow down, invite stillness, pay attention to what's here, act with care and kindness, that's much more accessible, so much easier to remember. And really, at the heart, that is all that the Buddhist path is asking of us. And one of the teachings of the Buddha that I come back to again and again because it's such a beautiful promise is called the Cetana Sutta. And Cetana means act of will. And the Buddha teaches that the only place that we need an act of will on this path is in our choice to behave ethically. And if we do that one thing, that everything else on the spiritual path follows from it. There's no one watching or evaluating or judging us or graduating us from one level to the next, but rather the Buddha's teaching says a person grounded in virtue naturally experiences freedom from an agitated mind. From this, joy naturally arises. From joy, rapture naturally arises. From rapture, serenity, ease. From this sort of serenity and ease, samadhi or concentration, clear seeing arises. Insight into reality, all the way to complete freedom, to nibbana. Only one act of will is needed. That choice, that commitment to kindness, compassion, and letting go. And that choice naturally inclines us in the direction of freedom, all the way to complete freedom. That's the promise of the Buddha. Just like hate is a feedback loop for more and more hate, our choice to love and to care brings more of the same. Going slow, being still, paying attention, acting with kindness. That's it. That's the simple Dharma. That's all we really need. So I'll close with a more recent offering from Pico Iyer, who was interviewed at the Asia Society this year. And the interviewer said, "You've said that silence lives in a world beyond division. What should we learn from silence or solitude?" And he answered, "I read recently from one of the Hindu scriptures, if your mind is silent, abiding joy is yours." Many of us have this constant chatter in our heads. When we're freed from that chatter, suddenly the world is a much better, a truer place, a less divided place. The silence I describe is not just that of a quiet place. If you go to a monastery, the silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's this positive, calming presence created by years of prayer or meditation. He said, "I just ran into a sentence where the Buddhists say, thoughts cannot penetrate the vast blue sky. Even though I had a strong analytical training and I live by words, I think I'm happiest when the words and the thoughts fall away. I think all of us are. When we think about the peak moments in our life, they're often the times when we've been stripped of all words, when we fall desperately in love or in speechless wonder in a miraculous landscape, or even sometimes when we're scared and we have no words to bring to it. It's something much larger than our lives." And a poem from Kabir, "Go deeper, past thoughts into silence, past silence into stillness, past stillness into the heart. Let love destroy all that is left of you." So let's take a few moments and then let the words settle into some stillness. And I'd like to invite you, just a simple invitation, to notice where awareness is most prevalent in the body. A lot of times it's around the face. Seeing if you can allow awareness to drop below the head. Allow awareness to drop below the centers of thinking and speech. Allow awareness to drop below the vocal cords. And letting it come to rest somewhere in the center of the body, the heart or the belly. And words may continue, but seeing if that place can contain quiet, can be known in stillness. And just listen. Okay, so thank you for practice and listening and more practice. And would love to open the floor for any thoughts or questions or experiences that you would like to share. And And that goes for online, of course, as well. If you're online and you'd like to share, just raise your hand. Anyway, I just want to say thank you again so much for being here. We're going to close with reading this dedication of merit. But before we do, I just want to thank the volunteers, Sean, today, and I don't know if anyone else is volunteering today. Does everyone have a piece of, yeah. And ICD is supported by your generosity, your presence, your generosity, your time. So if you can, please drop a donation in the baskets in the back of the room. And if you aren't on our mailing list, please sign up.